Every day, tragedies occur all across the world, and sometimes, just by chance, they're captured on camera for the world to see. The internet is chock-a-block full of these horrifying clips, and in this video, we're going to cover 5 more shocking examples. From a terrifying crocodile encounter in Borneo, to an unbelievable sinkhole incident in South Korea. As usual, we've got a range of tragedies from all across the world, reminding you that any day could be your last. So grab a drink and draw the curtains, sit down, and let's get right into it. This first entry takes us to the eastern edge of the island of Borneo, Indonesia. Running through the region is the Mahakam River, a massive body of water that stretches over 900 kilometers. This river is a lifeline for people who live nearby. It's used for everything from fishing to transport and even washing. But beneath the surface, it hides something far more dangerous. The Mahakam River is known to be crocodile infested, something that the locals were well aware of, yet sometimes they must risk to wash or travel. On the afternoon of September the 15th, 2017, a 16-year-old boy by the name of Arjuna went down to the river to wash. As he stood there in the shallows, a crocodile leapt out of the water and struck him. Arjuna was dragged under the water in seconds, and sadly, he never resurfaced. The following morning, on September the 16th, despite extensive search efforts by the police and locals, there was still no sign of Arjuna. This is when a specialist was called in to help locate him. Police, as well as locals, contacted a man who lived nearby named Supriyanto. Supriyanto was known as the Crocodile Shaman and claimed to have supernatural powers to communicate with and control wild crocodiles. Sounds amazing, right? This Crocodile Shaman seemed like the perfect answer, and so, that morning, he soon found himself by the river as well. He was ready to wade in and find the boy who went missing the previous day. All captured on video, witnesses watched as he lowered himself into the dangerous waters, the same exact place where the 16-year-old had been swept away the previous day. Multiple people watched as he swam confidently through the river, completely believing that he had these supernatural powers that rendered him immune to the crocodiles. The crocodile shaman, Supriyanto, chanted and conducted a prayer to protect himself as well as summon the crocodile that had snatched the boy. It actually looked like it was going okay. I can't see any crocodiles. The shaman could be seen swimming peacefully across the murky waters, performing the ritual to summon the beast.
Dekat sudah di dalam sini dia.
Completely out of the blue, Supriyanto was snatched under the water, and within just seconds, he too disappeared. The people that were watching couldn't believe what they'd just witnessed. They stood by the water in an eerie silence, hoping that he would resurface, but the water was still. He never did. Supriyanto said that he was protected and that he could communicate with the crocodiles, but this clearly wasn't true. Not long after he was taken, a large crocodile could be seen dragging an object through the water. It was clear that this was Supriyanto in his jaws. The famous crocodile shaman had finally met his match. Rescue teams continued their efforts, and the following day, not only was the 16-year-old located near to where he was snatched, but Supriyanto was also found floating later that evening. Honestly, I'm not sure any kind of magic exists to tame wild animals, let alone crocodiles, but this entry is just another crazy reminder that nature is scary and truly unpredictable. If you're not careful, or believe you too have magical crocodile powers, nature can snatch your life away in just a moment. This next entry takes us to the busy streets of Eastern Seoul, South Korea. On March the 24th, 2025. That day, it was a calm spring day, the sun was out, the skies were clear, and for most people, it felt like just another ordinary Monday. But for one man, the earth, quite literally, was about to give way beneath him. The man in question was 33-year-old, known publicly only by his surname, Park. According to a childhood friend, Park was legendary among his peers for his relentless work ethic. He worked 7 days a week without fail. After his regular office job, he even worked as a delivery driver to earn a bit of extra cash for the family, zipping through Seoul's busy streets late into the evening. But that Monday, Park was out making deliveries on his motorcycle, as he did every evening until it came to around 6:29 PM. As Park approached an intersection in Gangdang-gu, all of a sudden, disaster struck. All captured on dashcam, a massive sinkhole measuring nearly 65 meters wide and 60 meters deep opened right beneath his path as he drove along the motorway. A car in front of him jolts violently as its rear wheels narrowly escape the drop, but Park, just behind it, just wasn't so lucky. In a blink of an eye, he vanished into the crumbling ground, and just like that, poof, he was gone. Now, I've already covered a case where a woman fell into a sinkhole and was actually never found. The problem with sinkholes is that you never know how deep they're gonna go. It might look 20 meters deep, but underneath, it's far, far deeper than even that. Some sinkholes are formed from man-made constructions failing, like pipes or sewer systems, but sometimes they're just a result of corrosion of the underpinning rocks, such as limestone and salt, leading to weakness and eventually a sinkhole. Upon hearing the news that someone had fallen into a sinkhole, rescue teams were dispatched to the scene, but when they got there, all they could see was a massive hole in the ground, no sign of life whatsoever. Nearly 40 emergency personnel worked through the night, sifting through the mud, trying to find him. Rescue was hampered because the soil was mixing with water under the ground, making it almost impossible to dig through. In the night, they found his motorcycle, they found his phone, but Park was nowhere to be seen.
We have been manually removing soil to search for the missing person underground. However, due to cracks forming on the upper part of the sinkhole, further entry was deemed too dangerous.
With tons of water and soil accumulated at the sinkhole, rescue workers in diving suits as well as a search and rescue dog continue their efforts to find the victim. Additionally, a car driver who passed through the area just before the collapse was injured and transported to the hospital. Schools in the area decided to close on Tuesday as a precaution for student safety.
Rescue efforts continued, and 17 hours later, at 11:22 AM, Park was finally discovered, buried in thick mud more than 160 feet below the surface of where he'd been swallowed. Absolutely terrifying. As I said, at least his body was recovered, but I can't even begin to imagine what his last moments were. Just pitch black, buried by falling mud, suffocating on it. He probably didn't even know what happened. Initial investigations as to why this occurred couldn't rule out the possibility of human man-made underground voids, and evidence pointed towards a nearby subway construction. Now, this case was truly shocking. It's another prime example that death can truly strike. It can take you off this planet at any moment. So as I say, treasure your loved ones, and if for any reason you see a sinkhole forming, don't go anywhere near it, because it could very well be the last thing that you do. Did you know that Myanmar is one of the world's biggest sources of jade? The remote, mineral-rich mountains of Kachin State produce around 70% of the global supply of this precious stone. Myanmar's jade trade is reported to be worth more than $30 billion a year. So, if you ever see a jade, likely chances are it came from Myanmar. But of course, like anything valuable in this world, the moment we find something beautiful and natural, we tear it out in masses for profits until there's nothing left. Jade mining in Myanmar is a mix of industrial scale operations, which has its own risks in itself, as well as incredibly dangerous low-tech scavenging. When these big jade companies dig into hillsides, they extract what they think is valuable and dump everything else onto huge heaps called tailings. These piles are usually dumped dangerously on inclines and can rise hundreds of feet high and stretch for acres. These piles are made of loose rock, soil and debris and are completely unstable, especially when wet. These tailings sadly then attract hundreds of freelance miners known as jade pickers or scavengers. These people sift through the unstable mining waste by hand, looking for jade that might have been missed. These people often use no protective equipment, and many sleep in ramshackle huts at the bottom of the piles to get early access the next day. In Myanmar sits the Pakant Township. Here resides the world's biggest jade mine, employing thousands of people, supplying jades all across the world. Now, some workers that work in mines in Myanmar are illegal and underage, working for 12 to 16 hours a day, often 7 days a week. These workers endure some of the most inhuman conditions on Earth. Long hours, no safety, toxic exposure, drug addiction, as well as the constant risk of death. Also, the world can buy a shiny green stone. Now, all of this work sounds extremely dangerous, and that's because it is. Big jade companies, some with ties to the military or even powerful elite in the government, often claim to follow safety protocols to a T. But, in practice, safety is rarely enforced, oversight is weak, and corruption is widespread. The companies behind it have no problem using real people as disposable tools in the process, ignoring the fact that the work is brutal and often fatal. Between 2008 and 2024, over 600 people were killed in more than 10 landslides that occurred just in the Pakant Township, with many other deaths going unreported. But on July 2nd, 2020, a tragedy would occur that would be the worst in the country's history. Leading up to July 2nd, continuous and intense monsoon rains were hitting the Pakant region. But this wouldn't stop the hundreds of workers and pickers heading towards the jade mines. After all, it was monsoon season. A bit of rain isn't going to stop them doing their day-to-day, it's expected. However, at approximately 6:30 AM, as many were already at work at the mines, as well as scavenging, a terrible noise began to echo through the mountainside. Low rumbling and cracking noises could be heard from the distance, described as a deep growl. Just seconds later, one of the massive debris piles gave way, and those on the top were instantly swallowed. Those further down saw a huge wave of debris coming down the mountainside like a tsunami. This wave of thick, fast-moving sludge and debris was 20 feet high and moved like a freight train. Some might have paused, looked up, some shouted to run, but there was just no time to react. Those caught in its path did not stand a chance. Although it looked like water, for the miners, it wouldn't have felt as you'd imagine. It would have been thick, choking sludge, crashing into them with the weight of a collapsing building. It would have felt like being tackled by a mountain. All those that were picking and scavenging just couldn't escape. They soon found themselves trapped in sludge before being buried alive. And as I always say, a total catastrophe unfolded. The landslide didn't just bury people, it swallowed an entire worksite. Bodies disappeared into the sludge, motorcycles were crushed like tin, as well as heavy machinery. Recorded in this video, you can see how the landslide fills the bottom of the mountain like water in a bowl. Hundreds of people had died within moments. As it continued to rain, the Myanmar Fire Services Department, as well as the army and other government units, quickly rushed to the scene and dove into the sea of mud and twisted debris, hoping to find some people alive. They utilised diggers and sniffer dogs, searching for survivors, and amazingly, some people were found. But for the majority of workers, it was too late. Rescue teams combed through the mud for days, and by the end of this ordeal, it had turned into the deadliest mining disaster in Myanmar's history, with at least 174 confirmed deaths and over 100 people still missing. The majority of the latter were never recovered at all. Weirdly, in order to be accounted for in the death toll, your body had to be recovered, and if it wasn't, you were just on the list of the missing. According to the reports, families of the deceased were provided around $2,500 in compensation by aid agencies as well as the government, which, to be fair, is basically nothing for a loved one's death. However, this compensation was reliant upon the recovery of the victim's body. Families of those missing did not receive any compensation at all. In the wake of the disaster, environmental and human rights organisations such as Global Witness condemned the government's failure to enforce safety regulations and called for immediate reforms in the mines. They urged for the suspension of large-scale, illegal and dangerous mining operations and demanded accountability for companies violating safety and environmental standards. However, these calls for reform went unheeded. Thousands of people still mine in the worst conditions possible. Thousands more pick jade from the piles. Another landslide occurred in the following year and killed at least 3 people, leaving 70 to 100 missing. So more like 100 or so deaths. It seems like this horror is doomed to repeat itself forever until significant changes are made. Next up, we've got a truly terrifying clip that was recorded in Trujillo, northwestern Peru, on the 21st of February 2025. Located in the southwestern part of Trujillo was the Real Plaza shopping centre. Built in 2007, this shopping centre featured a variety of stores, restaurants, and after several expansions, a food court and even a cinema. It sounds better than the malls that we've got nearby. This shopping centre was something that the locals went to often, bringing their kids, friends and family to have a good time and spend some hard-earned dosh. In 2023, the then mayor of Trujillo ordered the closure of the Real Plaza due to its structural deficiencies and said publicly that the appropriate thing to do would have been to have it demolished. However, the plaza reopened to the public in January 2024 amid pressure from other politicians. So, that Friday, over 300 people were inside the shopping centre, with the majority of the visitors inside the food hall. This food hall was the centrepiece of the mall. As it always is in every mall, there's food shops galore, and in the evening, as you'd expect, it was full of people, eating food with their family, kids and friends. At approximately 8:41 PM, guests inside the food hall reported hearing a loud exploding sound coming from above. And then seconds later, a portion of the ceiling collapsed in the food hall. A portion measuring an area of approximately 700 to 800 square feet collapsed. This included the roof over a children's play area. Those caught in the debris didn't stand a chance as tons and tons of metal and concrete came crashing down on them, pinning them and killing some instantly. Over 300 people who were enjoying a meal suddenly found themselves trapped in a nightmare. As it fell, a plume of dust blanketed the room, and when it finally settled, patrons couldn't believe their eyes. Several people were buried and screaming for help through the rubble. Survivors quickly trying to help those trapped, but struggled to move any of the heavy debris from on top of them. Of course, emergency services rushed to the scene. A team of over 100 firefighters and police worked to save those who they could and help those injured. Recovery teams also struggled to lift the heavy roof debris from those trapped, so they had to call in specialist hydraulic machinery delaying assistance to those critically injured under the rubble. All throughout the night and into the following day, rescue teams scoured the debris, rescuing those trapped and recovering bodies. All in all, this incident left 8 people dead, with 3 of the dead being just children. The Real Plaza management released a statement expressing their condolences to the victims and announced the temporary closure of all their shopping centres nationwide as a gesture of mourning. Initial investigations revealed that this whole tragedy could and should have been avoided. Rain and humidity had weakened the roof, leading to the collapse. This kind of damage and erosion would have been clearly visible upon inspection, but obviously no inspection was being done, sparking public outrage and a renewed scrutiny over building safety regulations in Peru. The president of Peru expressed her condolences to the families of the victims, saying that the corresponding investigation will be carried out and those found responsible will be punished with a severe penalty. Sadly, as of the time of writing this, nobody has yet to be held accountable. There have been no names released, nor has anyone been arrested. The regional government declared a period of mourning for the 22nd and the 23rd of February, ordering flags to be flown at half-mast in honour of the victims. People were, and still are, furious at the government for reopening the building, despite clear safety problems, putting many people's lives at risk. The government even demanded the closure, but didn't follow through on it. They just allowed it to stay open. So they are also partially responsible. If they'd left it closed and demolished it like they said, 8 innocent people would still be with us today. This next entry brings us to a place that's sadly all too familiar on this channel, India, or more specifically, the state of Madhya Pradesh in the town of Harda on February the 6th, 2024. In Harda, located in the Baragar area, was a 3-story fireworks factory. This factory was initially built on rural land, but after 20 years of business, it found itself situated in a densely packed part of town, surrounded by homes and shops. This factory employed approximately 200 people and was one of the main job opportunities for locals in the area. Despite this particular fireworks factory having a long history of deaths and failed inspections, it remained open. In 2015, an explosion at the factory resulted in the deaths of 2 workers. Owner Rajesh Agarwal was sentenced to 10 years in prison in 2021, but he appealed this verdict and actually remained free on bail, continuing to run his various fireworks factories all across India. But of course, on that fateful day, the sun was shining as it always does. Nothing was out of the ordinary, but unbeknownst to the locals and the workers inside the factory, a tragedy would soon unfold, and it would turn into total terror. At around 11 AM, as locals and workers bustled about the factory, producing fireworks, grinding gunpowder, all of a sudden, a box of stored gunpowder fell and somehow ignited a fire. Before anyone could do anything, it jumped from the gunpowder and straight onto the large stacks of fireworks nearby. By the time this occurred, it was already far too late to fight the blaze, and workers began fleeing the building en masse. But for some, they just weren't quick enough. Before long, it was up in a ball of flames. By 11 AM, the fire had completely engulfed the building, sadly with several still trapped inside. As locals and first responders rushed to the scene, all captured on camera, the burning building suddenly exploded into a cascade of flames, completely obliterating the factory as well as many surrounding homes and buildings. This blast was so severe that it threw debris fragments up to 250 meters away, and the sound waves shattered glass windows up to 5 kilometers away. As flames tore through the remains of the factory and nearby homes, first responders tried to help, but they were met with an almost impossible situation. Despite fire teams' best efforts to subdue the flames, it was just too powerful. It continued to feed off the materials inside the factory and exploded several more times throughout the day. The fire was too hot and the smoke was too thick. As the day ticked on, the fireworks factory continued to explode multiple times. Soon, the factory was reduced to a smouldering pile of rubble. It looked like a war zone. Bodies lay strewn all across the street, and injured lay in pools of blood awaiting emergency assistance. More than 35 ambulances were sent to the scene to cope with the emergency, but still they were inundated with injured and dead. Even after putting out the flames, it was so hot that emergency crews couldn't even get close to the factory until late that night. After all the commotion settled down, sadly this fire had taken the lives of 13 people and injured more than 172 others. Now the people injured were burnt to varying degrees, some had fractured bones in the explosion, and some had even lost arms and legs. 50 plus families were left homeless, forced to live in camps for months until they could be rehomed. If only they'd actually sentenced the owner to his crimes, then none of this would have happened. Many were left pondering the negligence towards basic fire safety principles that led to this terrible catastrophe. A day after the blast, the state police arrested the fireworks factory owner as well as his son and lodged a case for them under culpable homicide not amounting to murder, attempt to culpable homicide, and Abuse of Explosive Substance Act of 1908. Officials then began their investigation to figure out what had happened, and it was then discovered that this factory should have never been open. Its license was first suspended years ago and was then eventually cancelled. But despite this factory remained open, as well as several others across India. To make things worse, owners were also storing far more explosives than safe, as well as storing gunpowder when they shouldn't have been directly inside the factory. All of these things compounded the tragedy when it occurred. Soon after, a 40-page report was released, and it found that the accident did not happen out of the blue, and that multiple warning signs were ignored. In 2022, during an investigation, several irregularities were found in the factory, including the fact that approved plans or drawings of the factory were missing the second and third floor. It was only approved for a single story. It's just ridiculous. Basically, the entire thing was all wrong. It was a deadly recipe for disaster waiting to happen. Nobody should have been working there. Nobody should have even been living close to it. It's negligence and corruption at its finest. So far, at the time of writing this, 7 arrests have been made, with 20 licenses, including those of 16 from the accused kin, and 4 others were suspended. So basically, they took away all of his other fireworks factories. A period of mourning was declared as the Prime Minister announced a 2 lakh compensation to the families of the deceased and 50,000 rupees to those injured. But unfortunately, this compensation was just the tip of an iceberg of what was actually damaged and broken in the blast. For the majority of those affected, this compensation was just nothing. It did little to help them rebuild their lives, their homes, replace limbs, as well as bringing back those lost. The area where the fireworks factory once stood now is a charred crater. Affected individuals are still fighting for fair compensation and the reconstruction of their houses so they can be restored to pre-blast conditions. But that is the end of the video. May everyone featured rest in peace. I mean, wowzers trousers.
Wow, that's what I thought. Wowzers trousers.
Again, I'm amazed that I'm still able to find clips like these. One of the main reasons I started this series was to shine a light on tragedies that you may not be aware of. Tragedies that may not appear in the news. Honestly, it's a bit strange what does and does not hit international attention. But starting from the top, we've got the Crocodile incident in Borneo. I'm lost for words. It's truly sad that a 16-year-old was snatched by the croc, but for the crocodile shaman to willingly wade into the place where the boy was snatched just the previous day is pretty silly. He may have believed he could communicate with the crocs, and it may or may not have worked in the past, but in this case his luck ran out and it cost him his life. So, lesson learnt, don't trust anyone when they say they can tame nature, because nature just can't be tamed. Then we've got the sinkhole death in Seoul. Holy moly, how sudden that occurred was just insane to me. Park was just driving along, working hard to provide for his family, and the ground literally opened up beneath him to swallow him. This case is a prime example of when it's your time to go, it's your time to go. I'm glad that at least his body was found, because as I said, I covered a case previously where a lady fell in and was never discovered despite several weeks of searching. Then of course we can't forget the landslide in Myanmar. This one really hit me hard. The people working at these mines have literally no other choice but to head there and pick what they can. There's no other jobs in this area that pay this well, and so they risk their lives. It's really sad that this is what these people are forced to do. And even if they're formally employed by these companies, they still get zero benefits, they're treated like slaves, and when they die, they're just reported missing as they can't be bothered to dig through the mud and the rock to find them. Honestly, after reading and researching the jade industry, I will definitely not be buying any jade jewelry, despite it looking pretty cool, or any diamond for that matter. I'm definitely going to look into fake diamonds in the future, because all of these stones are tainted with real human blood, and is it worth it for a shiny little stone? I'd say it isn't. Then we've got the roof collapse in Peru. Holy crap, that footage is terrifying. The amount of people that were chilling in the food court at the time of the collapse was shocking. It's horrifying that multiple children had to die here. And then to find out that the whole place should have been shut down and demolished years ago, it breaks my heart. This is one of those cases that seems to have been swept under the rug and did not reach international news for no good reason. And last, but definitely not least, we've got the factory fire in India. That blast was shocking. The fact that these people were so close to be able to record that footage is crazy, to be honest. I'm not sure if they were injured recording it, but yeah, they seemed way too close to that. Of course, this is nowhere near the level of Beirut or even the West Blast, but this explosion was certainly enough to sweep you off your feet, even stood hundreds of feet away. Sadly, as is all too common on this channel, it's just another case of negligence, greed, and corruption. The owner should have been sent to prison for the deaths of 2 workers in the previous years, but wasn't. How can you kill someone at work in an explosion, appeal your sentence, and just walk free? It just really boggles my mind, to be honest with you. If the owner had been sent to prison when he should have been, or if the factory had been shut when all of these safety violations were reported through the years, then none of this would have happened. The owners were storing fireworks in larger quantities than ever allowed, and even storing dangerous explosive gunpowder nearby. It was just waiting for something to go wrong, and I really hope the families affected get the compensation they deserve, because this was horrifying, tragic, and totally avoidable. But, most importantly, what did you guys think of this one? As always, I tried to read all the comments below, so do let me know your opinions on these cases. I do apologise this video was so delayed. I've just got a lot of stuff going on right now in my life, and I'm struggling to balance the workload and keep up frequent uploads, as you guys expect. So as I said, please bear with me. I'm trying to get these videos out quicker. They just seem to be taking longer and longer and longer these days. But as I said, I appreciate your patience. But just before I go, if you're interested in seeing early, uncut, and uncensored, as well as ad-free content, go and check out my Patreon linked below. And while you're down there, tap that sub button, as well as the notification bell to be alerted at when I release content such as this. But I will see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.